The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a soft hiss as Ambassador Jake Morrison walked through them, for what he knew would be the last time. His black diplomatic uniform bore the simple blue and white emblem of Earth, a small symbol that had once filled him with pride but now felt like a weight on his chest. Behind him walked Captain Lisa Hayes, her military dress uniform crisp and perfect, her face showing the same controlled anger that burned in Morrison's gut. The chamber was enormous, built to accommodate dozens of different alien species in their various shapes and sizes. Crystal beings floated in specialized atmospheric bubbles, while insect-like creatures perched on elevated platforms designed for their multiple legs. The smell was always strange here, a mixture of different atmospheric gases and the various scents that each species brought with them. Morrison had grown used to it over his 3 years as Earth's primary representative, but today it made him feel sick. Chairman Veltar of the Zephyrians occupied the central speaking platform, his crystalline body catching and refracting the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns across the walls. His voice came through the translation matrix as a series of musical tones that the machines converted into words that Morrison could understand. The technology was impressive, but it had never quite captured the contempt that Morrison knew was behind every word the chairman spoke. The council has reached its decision regarding the human petition for expanded trade rights, Veltar announced, his crystal form shifting colors from blue to a deep purple that Morrison had learned meant displeasure. After careful consideration of all evidence presented, we find that humanity lacks the maturity necessary for unrestricted access to galactic markets. Morrison felt his jaw tighten but kept his expression neutral. This was what they had expected, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the stomach. For 3 years, Earth had been asking for the same basic rights that every other council species enjoyed. The right to trade freely with any willing partner. The right to establish colonies beyond the small sector of space they had been allocated. The right to be treated as equals rather than children who needed constant supervision. Furthermore, Veltar continued, his purple hue deepening, the Council has voted to implement additional protective measures for humanity's own benefit. Effective immediately, all human space travel will be limited to pre-approved routes. All human trade agreements must be reviewed and approved by the Council Economic Board. All human technological development will be subject to Council oversight to ensure it meets appropriate safety standards. The words hit Morrison like physical blows. They were not just denying humanity's request for equality. They were actually taking away what little freedom they had already been given. Captain Hayes shifted slightly behind him, and Morrison could practically feel the rage radiating from her. She was a warrior, trained to fight when faced with threats, and this was the greatest threat humanity had ever encountered. Not conquest by force, but slow strangulation through bureaucracy and condescension. The Council recognizes that some humans may find these measures restrictive. Veltar's translated voice carried what might have been amusement. But we act only out of concern for a young species that has shown concerning tendencies toward violence and unpredictable behavior. These measures will remain in place until humanity demonstrates sufficient maturity to handle greater responsibilities. Morrison looked around the chamber at the faces, sensors and various sensory organs of the species that made up the Council. He saw the same expression on all of them, regardless of their biology. Smug satisfaction. They were enjoying this. They had never wanted humanity as equals, and now they had found a way to make that official. The peaceful Quilorians looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The warrior-like Kethvar actually seemed to be enjoying the show. The tentacled Moravians whispered among themselves in their liquid language, probably already calculating how much money they would make from humanity's forced dependence. The ambassador had prepared several speeches for different possible outcomes of today's session. He had words ready if they were granted full rights, words if they were partially accepted, and words if they were completely rejected. But he had not prepared for this. This was worse than rejection. This was humiliation designed to break humanity's spirit and force them into permanent subservience. Morrison reached into his jacket and pulled out a small datapad. With a few quick touches, he activated a program that Captain Hayes had installed for him. In 30 seconds, every human ship station and colony in known space would receive the signal he was about to send. There would be no taking it back after this moment. Chairman Veltar, Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Distinguished members of the Galactic Council, I thank you for making this decision so easy for me. The ambassador touched a final control on his data pad and then placed it carefully on the speaking platform in front of him. Humanity formally withdraws from all diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council, effective immediately. We resign our membership. We renounce all treaties and agreements. We reject your authority over human affairs in any form. The chamber erupted into chaos. Veltar's crystalline form flashed through a rapid series of colors that Morrison's 3 years of experience told him meant shock, anger, and confusion all mixed together. The Moravian delegation began a high-pitched whistling that their translation units rendered as excited chatter. The Kethvar representative actually stood up from his platform, his 6 legs clicking against the metal in what Morrison knew was their species' equivalent of applause. "Ambassador Morrison," Veltar's voice cut through the noise. "You cannot simply withdraw from the Council. No species has ever taken such action. The economic consequences alone would be catastrophic for your primitive civilization." Morrison smiled for the first time in months. "Chairman, you have just declared that humanity is too immature and unpredictable to be trusted with basic freedoms. You have decided that we need your protection, whether we want it or not. Well, consider this our response to your protection." Captain Hayes stepped forward and activated her own communication device. Her voice would now be broadcast to every human military unit in space. "All human vessels, this is Captain Hayes with Priority Alpha orders. Fortress Protocol is now in effect. Cut all communications with alien vessels. Return to human space immediately. No exceptions." Morrison picked up his datapad and walked toward the chamber's exit. Behind him, Captain Hayes fell into step, her hand resting casually on the ceremonial weapon at her side. The weapon had never been anything more than a symbol before today, but Morrison noticed that several council members seemed nervous about it now. "You are making a terrible mistake," Veltar called after them. "Your species cannot survive without council support. You will be back within a year, begging for readmission on whatever terms we choose to offer." Morrison paused at the chamber doors and looked back at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. 3 years ago, he had walked through these same doors full of hope and excitement about humanity's future among the stars. Today he felt something different. Not hope but determination, not excitement but cold resolve. "Chairman," he said quietly, "you are about to learn something important about humans. When you tell us we cannot do something, we do not hear a warning. We hear a challenge." The doors closed behind them with the same soft hiss they had opened with, but Morrison knew that sound marked the end of more than just a diplomatic meeting. It marked the end of humanity's childhood among the stars and the beginning of something that would surprise everyone, including themselves. Colonel Dan Phillips stood at the viewing window of Luna Base Command Center, watching the last alien transport ship disappear into the starfield beyond Earth's moon. 3 months had passed since Ambassador Morrison's dramatic exit from the Galactic Council, and the effects were more dramatic than anyone had expected. The ship he was watching belonged to the Quilorian Trade Consortium, and its departure meant that every single non-human vessel had now left the Sol system. Behind him, communication officers worked frantically at their stations, coordinating the most massive military and civilian operation in human history. The Fortress Protocol was not just about cutting diplomatic ties with the Council. It was about making humanity completely independent from alien influence in every possible way. Every human colony, research station, mining operation, and exploration vessel scattered across dozens of star systems was being recalled or supplied for permanent isolation. "Colonel," called Lieutenant Nancy Brooks from the communications desk, "we have confirmation from the Mars colonies. All Kethvar technical advisors have departed on the last scheduled transport. Dr. Carter says her teams are all ready, working on replacing their atmospheric processing systems with human-designed alternatives." Phillips nodded but did not turn away from the window. He had been expecting this moment for years, though not quite like this. As a military strategist, he had always known that humanity's dependence on alien technology and trade partnerships was a dangerous weakness. What he had not expected was that the break would come so suddenly or so completely. The door to the command center opened, and President Helen Brooks walked in, followed by her security detail and several cabinet members. Phillips turned and saluted, but the president waved him to relax. She looked tired, which was understandable given that she had been working 20-hour days since the council crisis began. "What is our status, Colonel?" Brooks asked, walking to stand beside him at the viewing window. All human assets are either back in our space or en route, Madam President, Phillips reported. We have successfully evacuated or resupplied every human facility that was dependent on alien support. The last transport from the outer colonies arrived yesterday. Brooks nodded, but Phillips could see the worry in her eyes. And the economic situation? Bad, but not as catastrophic as the experts predicted, Phillips replied honestly. The immediate problem is not resources or food, but replacement parts and technical systems that we had been importing from Council species. Dr. Carter's teams on Mars are working around the clock to reverse engineer everything we need. The President looked out at the starfield where alien ships had been a common sight just months before. How long before we run into serious problems? 6 months for critical systems, maybe a year for everything else, Phillips said. But that assumes we cannot figure out how to build our own replacements. Dr. Carter seems optimistic that we can do better than that. What Phillips did not tell the President was that he was actually excited about the challenge. For too long, humanity had taken the easy path of buying solutions from more advanced species instead of developing their own. Now they had no choice but to innovate, and early reports from research facilities across human space suggested that necessity was already driving remarkable breakthroughs. On Mars, Dr. Amy Carter was having the same thoughts as she stood in her laboratory, looking at the components of a Zephyrian atmospheric processor that had been keeping the colony's air breathable for 5 years. The machine was elegant and efficient, using principles that human science barely understood. But understanding was exactly what her team was going to have to achieve in the next few months. The crystal matrix is the key, she explained to her assistant, Dr. Tony Wells. The Zephyrians grow these crystals in zero gravity, using some kind of harmonic resonance that we never bothered to learn because it was easier to just buy the finished product. Wells looked at the complex crystal structure with doubt written across his face. Amy, it took them thousands of years to develop this technology. How are we supposed to figure it out in months? Carter smiled with the kind of confidence that had made her the head of xenobiology at the Mars Research Institute. Tony, they developed this over thousands of years because they had thousands of years to work with. We have a deadline. Big difference, she was right, and both of them knew it. Human innovation had always been driven by pressure and necessity. Give a human engineer an impossible deadline and limited resources, and they would usually find a way to make it work. It might not be pretty, it might not be elegant, but it would function. Across the solar system, similar scenes were playing out at every human facility. On the asteroid mining stations, engineers were frantically working to replace Moravian gravity manipulators with human-designed alternatives. In the orbital shipyards around Earth, designers were scrapping decades of ship plans that relied on alien components and starting over with purely human technology. The psychological effect was as important as the practical one. For the first time since joining galactic civilization, humans were forced to rely entirely on themselves. The safety net was gone. The easy answers were no longer available. They had to sink or swim using only their own abilities. President Brooks received reports every morning that showed both the problems and the surprising solutions that were emerging. Food production was actually increasing as human agricultural techniques improved without alien oversight. Energy generation was becoming more efficient as human engineers stopped trying to copy alien methods and started developing their own approaches, but it was the military reports that both worried and impressed her most. Colonel Phillips had been tasked with developing a purely human defense capability, since they could no longer count on Council protection or Council restraint. The results were disturbing in their implications. Madam President, Phillips reported during their morning briefing, our weapons development teams have made some interesting discoveries. It seems that human approaches to military technology are quite different from Council species. Different how? Brooks asked, though she was not sure she wanted to hear the answer. More direct. More efficient. More deadly, Phillips replied bluntly. Council species seem to prefer defensive technologies and non-lethal solutions. Human military thinking focuses on ending conflicts quickly and decisively. Brooks felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying we are developing weapons that could threaten Council species? Phillips considered his words carefully. I am saying that we are developing weapons that could defend humanity against Council species. Whether that represents a threat depends entirely on their intentions toward us. The implications hung in the air between them. Humanity had always been treated as the junior partner in galactic civilization, the species that needed protection and guidance. But what if that protection had really been a form of control? What if the Council had been keeping humanity weak and dependent for their own reasons? Meanwhile, in the furthest human outpost at the edge of known space, Captain Ben Rogers was making a discovery that would change everything. His exploration vessel had been investigating strange energy readings when they detected something that should not have existed. A ship not human but not Council either. Something completely different. The alien vessel was beautiful in a way that no Council ship had ever been. Instead of the utilitarian designs favored by galactic civilization, this ship seemed to flow like liquid metal shaped by an artist's hand. When it hailed Rogers' ship, the voice that came through their communication system spoke perfect English. "Human vessel, this is Commander Zara of the Ethereal Collective. We have been waiting a long time to meet your species without Council interference. Perhaps it is time for a proper introduction." Rogers stared at his communication officer, Lieutenant Kate Miller, who looked just as shocked as he felt. The Ethereal Collective was not a member of the Galactic Council. In fact, Rogers had never heard of them at all, which raised an interesting question about what else the Council had not told humanity about the wider universe. "Commander Zara," Rogers replied. "This is Captain Ben Rogers of the human exploration vessel Aurora. I think we would very much like to hear what you have to say." As the two ships moved closer together in the empty space between stars, Rogers realized that humanity's isolation from the Council might not mean isolation from everyone. There was a much larger universe out there than the Council had ever let them see, and humanity was finally free to explore it. 2 years had passed since humanity severed all ties with the Galactic Council, and Admiral Scott Baker stood on the bridge of the UES Phoenix watching his crew prepare for the most important test in human history. The ship around him was completely different from anything humanity had ever built before. Every component, every system, every piece of technology was designed and manufactured by human hands and human minds. No alien parts, no borrowed designs, no shortcuts taken from more advanced civilizations. The Phoenix was humanity's first attempt at building a faster-than-light vessel using purely human understanding of physics. Dr. Rachel Green had led the theoretical work from her laboratory on Europa, while thousands of engineers and scientists across human space had contributed to turning her equations into reality. If the test failed, humanity would remain trapped in their small corner of the galaxy. If it succeeded, everything would change. "All systems show green, Admiral," reported Commander Gary Thompson from the engineering station. "Dr. Green's quantum field generators are operating within normal parameters." Baker nodded and activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the Admiral. Today we find out if humans can reach the stars on their own terms. Prepare for FTL jump in 60 seconds. In the Galactic Council chambers, Chairman Veltar was receiving reports that made his crystalline structure flash with colors of deep concern. The intelligence networks that the Council maintained throughout their territory were bringing disturbing news about human activities. What had started as humanity's tantrum was becoming something much more serious. "The economic disruption continues to spread," reported Council economist Thanel, a spider-like being whose multiple eyes allowed him to read several reports simultaneously. "Moravian shipping consortiums have lost 37% of their contracts. Kethavar manufacturing centers are operating at reduced capacity due to lack of human consumers. Several border worlds that depended on human trade are requesting emergency economic assistance." Veltar's colors shifted to deep purple, the Zephyrian equivalent of a frown. When the Council had decided to put humanity in their place, they had expected the humans to come crawling back within months, desperate for the trade and technology they had grown dependent upon. Instead, humanity had vanished completely, and their absence was creating problems that the Council had not anticipated. "What about their technological development?" Veltar asked. "Surely they cannot maintain advanced systems without our support." Thanel consulted another report, his mandibles clicking with what might have been worry. "Intelligence suggests they are not just maintaining their technology, Chairman. They appear to be improving it. We have detected energy signatures from human space that do not match any known Council technologies." This was the news that Veltar had been dreading. The Council's control over galactic civilization was based partly on their technological superiority over newer species. If humanity was developing their own advanced technology, it could upset the careful balance that had maintained peace and order for thousands of years. On the distant world of Quiloria Prime, Ambassador Kethal was dealing with a crisis that his peaceful people had never faced before. The Quilorians were herbivorous beings who had built their civilization around cooperation and mutual aid. They had been among humanity's closest friends on the Council, and they were now paying the price for the Council's decision to isolate the human species. The agricultural crisis worsens each day, reported his aide, Senthal, her melodic voice carrying overtones of distress. Our food production systems were designed around human agricultural techniques. Without their expertise, crop yields have dropped by 40%. Kethal felt a pain in his chest that his species experienced when facing moral conflict. The Quilorians had voted against the measures that drove humanity from the Council, but they had not fought hard enough to prevent them. Now his people were suffering because they had lost access to human knowledge and friendship. "Have there been any responses to our private communications?" he asked hopefully. Senthal's coloring dimmed with sadness. "None. The humans maintain complete communications silence with all Council species. Even our most desperate pleas for medical assistance have gone unanswered." Back on the Phoenix, Admiral Baker felt his heart racing as the countdown reached 0. "Engage FTL drive," he ordered. The universe seemed to fold around them. Stars stretched into lines of light, space itself twisted in ways that human eyes had never been meant to see, and then everything snapped back to normal. The bridge crew looked at their instruments in stunned silence. "Navigation confirms successful jump," reported Lieutenant Chris Adams, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have traveled 43 light years in approximately 6 seconds." The bridge erupted in cheers, but Baker was already thinking about the implications. Humanity had not just achieved faster-than-light travel. They had done it using principles that seemed to be more efficient than anything the Council species used. Dr. Green's theories had proven correct, and her approach to manipulating space-time was fundamentally different from alien methods. Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, General Chris Andrews was overseeing construction of something that would have shocked the Council even more than the Phoenix's successful test. Hidden inside hollowed-out asteroids, human engineers were building the largest fleet of exploration vessels in galactic history. Each ship was designed for long-range missions beyond Council space, equipped with the new FTL drive and weapon systems that existed nowhere else in known space. The human approach to military technology had proven to be devastatingly effective. Where Council species built defensive systems designed to discourage conflict, humans built offensive systems designed to end conflicts quickly and decisively. The difference in philosophy was creating weapons that no Council species could match or even understand. Dr. Amy Carter stood in her expanded laboratory complex on Mars, looking at the results of 2 years of intensive research. The shelves around her held devices and materials that represented a complete revolution in human technology. Atmospheric processors that were twice as efficient as Zephyrian designs. Gravity manipulators that surpassed Moravian equipment. Energy systems that could power entire cities using principles that no Council species had ever discovered. Amy called her research partner Dr. Tony Wells from across the laboratory. "You need to see this." She walked over to find him staring at a quantum computer display that showed calculations she could barely comprehend. "What am I looking at?" she asked. "Proof that we have been thinking too small," Wells replied with excitement in his voice. "The quantum processing breakthrough we made last month? It is not just faster than Council technology. It is operating on completely different principles. We are not just catching up to them, Amy. We are leaving them behind." The implications hit Carter like a physical blow. Humanity had always seen themselves as the junior partners in galactic civilization, the species that needed to learn from their more advanced neighbors. But what if that had never been true? What if humanity's approach to science and technology was not inferior to Council methods, just different? What if the Council had been holding them back not out of concern for their development, but out of fear of their potential? On the border of human space, Captain Ben Rogers was meeting with Commander Zara of the Ethereal Collective for the 3rd time. The aliens from beyond Council territory had been sharing information about the wider galaxy that painted a very different picture than anything the Council had ever revealed. The universe was far larger and more diverse than humanity had been allowed to know. Your species interests us greatly, Zara explained through her translation device. Council species tend to think in terms of hierarchy and control. Humans think in terms of innovation and exploration. This makes you natural allies for those of us who exist beyond Council influence. Rogers felt a thrill of excitement mixed with apprehension. What exactly are you suggesting, Commander? A partnership, Zara replied. Access to regions of space that the Council has never explored. Contact with civilizations that the Council fears to approach. Knowledge and opportunities that your former associates would never willingly share. The captain looked at the star charts that Zara had provided, showing vast regions of space marked as unexplored or dangerous by Council records. But the ethereal collective had been traveling through these areas for millennia, making contact with species and discovering wonders that the Council had never imagined. There is something else you should know, Zara continued. The Council's treatment of your species is not unique. They have a long history of suppressing or controlling any civilization that shows potential to challenge their authority. You are simply the first to successfully break free from their influence. Rogers felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place in his mind. The Council had not been protecting humanity from the dangers of galactic civilization. They had been protecting themselves from humanity's potential. And now that humanity was free to develop that potential, they were discovering capabilities that surprised even themselves. As the Phoenix completed its historic test flight and began the journey back to human space, Admiral Baker composed a message that 4 years had passed since humanity's dramatic exit from galactic civilization, and Captain Ben Rogers stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel UES Horizon, watching something that no human had ever seen before. Through the viewing screen, he could see the impossible beauty of the ethereal collective's main habitat, a structure that seemed to exist partially outside normal space and time. The habitat appeared to be made of crystallized light, shifting and flowing in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Commander Zara materialized on his bridge using transportation technology that human science could barely comprehend. Her species appeared to be made of pure energy contained within a roughly humanoid shape, though Rogers had learned that this was just one of many forms she could take. The ethereal collective had evolved far beyond the physical limitations that bound other species, including humans, Captain Rogers, Zara said, her voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. We are pleased to welcome humanity as the newest members of the collective. Your species has proven worthy of our trust. Rogers felt a mixture of pride and uncertainty. The tests that the ethereal collective had put humanity through over the past 2 years had been unlike anything the Galactic Council had ever demanded. Instead of asking humans to prove their obedience or their willingness to follow established rules, the collective had tested their creativity, their independence, and their ability to find new solutions to impossible problems. What does membership mean for our people? Rogers asked. Zara's form shifted colors as she considered the question. Access to regions of space that span multiple galaxies. Technology that operates on principles your scientists have only begun to imagine. Contact with civilizations that the Council fears even to acknowledge exist. Lieutenant Kate Miller, Rogers' communications officer, looked up from her station with excitement in her voice. Captain, we are receiving a transmission from Earth. Priority Alpha from President Brooks. Rogers nodded to Zara, who seemed to understand that he needed privacy for official communications. She faded from view, though Rogers knew she was still present in ways that human senses could not detect. Put it through, Lieutenant, Rogers ordered. President Helen Brooks appeared on the main screen, though the transmission delay from the vast distance made real conversation impossible. She looked older than when Rogers had last seen her, but there was something new in her expression. Not the worry and uncertainty that had marked her early presidency during the crisis with the Council, but a quiet confidence that spoke of great accomplishments. Captain Rogers, the President began, I am sending you this message to inform you of humanity's decision regarding our future in this galaxy. The Exodus fleet is complete. Admiral Baker will be leading the first human expedition to the Andromeda Galaxy within the month. We have accepted the collective's offer to help us establish ourselves among new stars. Rogers felt his breath catch in his throat. The Exodus fleet had been discussed as a theoretical possibility, but to hear that it was actually ready for departure was stunning. Humanity was not just leaving the Galactic Council, They were leaving the galaxy entirely. The Council has made several attempts to renew diplomatic contact, Brooks continued. They have offered us everything we originally asked for and more. Full membership rights, unrestricted trade access, and complete autonomy over our internal affairs. But their offers come 4 years too late. We have learned to survive without them, and more importantly, we have learned what we are truly capable of when we are not held back by their limitations. On the other side of the galaxy, Chairman Veltar of the Zephyrians was reading reports that confirmed his worst fears. The Galactic Council was facing its first existential crisis in over 1,000 years. 3 member species were dealing with economic collapse directly caused by the loss of human trade and innovation. 2 more were experiencing civil unrest as their populations questioned the wisdom of driving away humanity. The entire council structure was beginning to crack under pressure. The Moravian Trade Consortium has formally requested emergency intervention, reported Council Secretary Thane L., his multiple eyes darting between various data displays. Their shipping networks have lost 60% of their capacity. Several of their core worlds are asking to withdraw from Council membership rather than face continued economic decline. Beltar's crystalline body flashed through colors that indicated deep stress. What about military options? Can we force humanity back into compliance? Thaniel's mandibles clicked with what might have been dark humor. Our intelligence services have been trying to assess human military capabilities. The results are disturbing. Human weapons technology has advanced beyond anything we understand. Their ships use principles that our scientists cannot explain. Most concerning of all, they appear to be building something in the space around their gas giant Jupiter that our sensors cannot properly analyze. The chairman's colors shifted to the deep red that indicated fear among his species. Are they planning to attack us? Unknown, Thanel replied. But intelligence suggests they are preparing for something much larger than defense of their home system. Meanwhile, in the orbital construction facilities around Jupiter, engineer Katie Mills was supervising the final assembly of humanity's greatest achievement. The Exodus fleet consisted of over 300 vessels, each one larger and more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. The ships were designed not just for exploration, but for carrying human civilization to a completely new galaxy. Each vessel contained everything needed to establish human colonies in Andromeda. Agricultural systems, manufacturing facilities, research laboratories, and living space for millions of people. But most importantly, each ship contained something that no other species in the known galaxy possessed: the absolute determination to succeed without anyone's permission or assistance. Dr. Rachel Green stood in the command center of the flagship UES Enterprise, watching final preparations for departure. The quantum computers that had made the Exodus fleet possible hummed quietly around her, processing calculations that would have been impossible just 5 years earlier. Her breakthrough in quantum processing had not just given humanity faster computers, it had given them a completely new understanding of how the universe worked at its most fundamental level. Dr. Green, called her assistant Dr. Lisa Hayes, we are receiving final passenger manifests from the colony ships. Over 2 million humans have volunteered for the Andromeda expedition. Green nodded, though she was not surprised by the numbers. Despite the risks and uncertainties of traveling to another galaxy, humans had been eager to sign up for the journey. Perhaps it was because they had spent 4 years proving that they could overcome any challenge, or perhaps it was simply because the adventure called to something deep in human nature, General. Chris Andrews walked into the command center carrying a data pad that contained the fleet's final military assessment. The Exodus fleet was not just an exploration mission, it was potentially humanity's entire future. If something went wrong in Andromeda, there would be no going back to the safety of known space. General, Green said, are we ready? Andrews looked at the datapad one final time before setting it aside. Dr. Green, we have weapons that no other species understands, ships that can travel farther and faster than anything in Council space, and technology that we developed entirely on our own. We are as ready as we will ever be. On the peaceful world of Quiloria Prime, Ambassador Kethal received a private communication that he had been hoping for but never expected to arrive. The message was brief and came through encrypted channels that the Council intelligence services could not monitor. Ambassador Kethal, the message began, this is President Brooks of Earth. We remember that your people opposed the measures that drove us from the Council. We remember your friendship and your efforts to find peaceful solutions. When we establish ourselves in Andromeda, there will be a place for the Quilorian people among the stars if you choose to join us. The invitation stands permanently. Kethal felt his chest swell with emotions that his species had no words to express. Hope, gratitude, and something that might have been love for a species that remembered kindness even after suffering injustice. He looked at his aide Senthal, who had been reading the message over his shoulder. Prepare a secure response, he told her quietly. Tell them that the Quilorian people will never forget this kindness, and that when the time comes, we will seriously consider their offer. As the Exodus fleet made its final preparations for departure, Captain Rogers received one last communication from Commander Zara of the Ethereal Collective. Her message was simple but filled with implications that would take humanity years to fully understand. Captain, she said, your species is about to begin the greatest adventure in galactic history. You are not the first to leave this galaxy seeking freedom from the Council's influence, but you may be the first to succeed in building something better. The Collective will be watching your progress with great interest. Rogers looked out at the star field that humanity was about to leave behind forever. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was dealing with the consequences of their decision to treat humans as children who needed constant supervision. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in their 1,000-year history. Chairman Veltar's crystalline form flickered rapidly through colors that indicated panic and desperation as he looked out at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Half the seats in the Great Chamber were empty, their occupants having withdrawn from the Council as economic collapse spread through their territories like a plague. We face the greatest crisis in Council history, Veltar announced, his translated voice carrying poorly disguised fear. The human withdrawal has triggered a cascade of economic and political failures that threaten the very foundation of our civilization. Council Secretary Thanel stood at his reporting station, his multiple eyes scanning data displays that painted an increasingly grim picture. The Moravian Trade Consortium has officially dissolved. The Kethvar Manufacturing Alliance has declared bankruptcy. 7 border worlds have requested immediate evacuation assistance as their economies have completely collapsed without human trade partnerships. In the viewing gallery reserved for observers, Ambassador Kethal of the Peaceful Quilorians watched the proceedings with a mixture of sadness and bitter satisfaction. His people had warned that driving away humanity would have consequences, but the Council's arrogance had made them deaf to such concerns. Now they were reaping the harvest of their own prejudice and fear. What of our attempts to re-establish contact? Asked Counselor Vextar of the insectoid hive worlds, her translated voice carrying the buzzing undertones of her species' anxiety. Veltar's colors dimmed to the deep blue that indicated profound disappointment among Zephyrians. All diplomatic overtures have been ignored. Our ambassadors are denied entry to human space. Our communications go unanswered. Intelligence reports suggest they are preparing for something far beyond simple independence. On the command bridge of the UES Enterprise, Admiral Scott Baker stood before the largest tactical display ever constructed by human hands. The screen showed the positions of over 300 vessels that made up humanity's Exodus fleet, each one a technological marvel that represented the absolute pinnacle of human engineering and determination. Behind him, President Helen Brooks and her senior advisors watched as the final countdown began. All ships report ready for departure, announced Commander Gary Thompson from the Fleet Coordination Station. Destination coordinates for Andromeda Galaxy have been confirmed and locked into navigation systems across the fleet. Brooks stepped forward to stand beside Baker, looking out at the greatest achievement in human history. The ships of the Exodus fleet were more than just vehicles for interstellar travel. They were humanity's declaration of independence from every limitation that had ever been placed upon them. Each vessel carried not just people and supplies, but the hopes and dreams of an entire species that had learned to reach for the impossible. Admiral, Brooks said quietly, give the order. Baker activated the fleet-wide communication system, knowing that his words would be recorded by history as the moment when humanity truly claimed its place among the stars. All ships, this is Admiral Baker. Humanity begins its greatest journey today. We leave this galaxy not in defeat but in triumph. We have proven that no force in the universe can limit human potential, except humans themselves. Prepare for jump to Andromeda. In the depths of space between galaxies, Commander Zara of the Ethereal Collective watched the human departure with something that might have been pride. Her species had existed for millions of years, had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations, but they had rarely witnessed anything as remarkable as humanity's transformation from galactic outcasts to interstellar pioneers in the span of just 5 years. The energy beings that made up the collective had initially approached humanity out of curiosity, interested in a species that showed the courage to defy the Galactic Council's authority. What they had discovered was something far more significant. A species that possessed the rare combination of innovation, determination, and moral courage that appeared perhaps once in a million years of galactic evolution. As the human fleet engaged their faster-than-light drives and began the journey to Andromeda, Zara sent a message across the dimensional barriers that separated the collective from normal space. The experiment has succeeded beyond all expectations. Humanity has proven worthy of the greatest gift we can offer. Back in the Galactic Council chambers, Chairman Veltar received a report that made his crystalline structure flash with colors of absolute terror. Council Intelligence Director Morthak, a slug-like being whose species specialized in information gathering, delivered news that confirmed their worst fears about human capabilities. "Chairman," Morthak reported in his liquid voice, "our long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures from the direction of human space. Analysis suggests they have achieved something that our scientists believe to be impossible." "What kind of achievement?" Veltar asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Intergalactic travel," Morthak replied. "The humans appear to have developed the ability to travel between galaxies. They are not just leaving our space, Chairman, they are leaving our galaxy entirely." The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. Humanity had not just rejected their authority, they had developed capabilities that exceeded anything the Council possessed. In 5 years of isolation, they had advanced from a dependent client species to something that the Council could neither control nor even comprehend. "There is more," Morthak continued. "Intelligence suggests they have made contact with entities from beyond our galaxy. The energy signatures we detected match nothing in our databases, but they appear to be associated with the departure of the human fleet." Veltar's colors cycled rapidly through the entire spectrum of Zephyrian emotion. Shock, fear, anger, and finally a deep purple that indicated the closest thing his species had to despair. "Send a priority message to human leadership. Offer them anything they want. Full council membership with voting rights equal to founding species. Exclusive trade agreements. Territory grants. Anything." The message was sent through every communication channel the Council possessed, broadcast on frequencies that would reach every human facility in known space. It was a complete capitulation, an admission that the Council had been wrong about everything. But like all the previous attempts at contact, it received no response. On the bridge of the UES Enterprise, Communications Officer Lieutenant Chris Adams received the Council's desperate plea and dutifully reported it to Admiral Baker. The Admiral listened to the offer in silence, then deleted it without comment. The time for negotiations had passed 5 years ago, when Ambassador Morrison walked out of the Council chambers for the last time. Dr. Rachel Green stood in the Enterprise's primary research laboratory, monitoring the quantum field generators that made intergalactic travel possible. The technology was based on principles that no Council species understood, developed through human innovation and determination rather than borrowed from more advanced civilizations. It represented something that the galaxy had never seen before, a species that had grown beyond the need for anyone's permission to achieve greatness. As the Exodus fleet crossed the vast emptiness between galaxies, Green received a message from the ethereal collective that contained star charts and navigational data for their new home. Andromeda Galaxy contained billions of stars and countless worlds, most of them unexplored by any intelligent species. It was a blank canvas upon which humanity could write its own destiny without interference from anyone. General Chris Andrews stood in the Enterprise's Strategic Planning Center, looking at reports from the advanced scout ships that had already reached Andromeda. The galaxy was rich in resources and filled with opportunities for expansion and growth. More importantly, it was empty of the kind of hierarchical civilizations that had tried to keep humanity contained. "General," asked his aide, Major Bill Stevens, "what are your orders for establishing our new territories?" Andrews smiled with the confidence of a species that had learned to overcome any challenge. Major, we build something better than what we left behind. We create a civilization based on human values, innovation, freedom, and the right of every intelligent being to reach their full potential. Meanwhile, in the abandoned council chambers, Chairman Veltar sat alone among empty seats and darkened displays. The great galactic civilization that had lasted for millennia was crumbling around him, and he finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. They had not been protecting humanity from the dangers of the galaxy. They had been protecting the galaxy from humanity's potential. The irony was complete. In trying to keep humanity small and manageable, the Council had created their own destruction. They had taught humanity that they could not depend on anyone but themselves. And humanity had learned that lesson so well that they no longer needed the galaxy at all. As the last human ship disappeared into the void between galaxies, Veltar composed a final entry for the Council historical records. Today we learned that the greatest danger to any civilization is not external conquest, but internal arrogance. We believed we were teaching humanity humility, but instead we taught them that they were capable of anything. They have taken that lesson and carried it to the Saint,